going to show you how I use an equilateral triangle ruler to cut these triangles. Some rulers look like they have 60-degree angles. This one you can see is printed on there, so I would double check to make sure that you actually have an equilateral triangle, otherwise this won't work. This is the 60-degree diamond mini designed by Krista Moser for Creative Grids, and basically you just set the ruler down. You can see on this ruler that it's marked with measurements. So here you go. So I line up the 3.5 inch mark. This is a 3.5 inch strip of fabric, and just make a cut. This ruler already has the point on the top cut off, which I think makes it a lot easier to sew the triangles. Then you literally just flip it and cut. And this is the same thing that you would do with your template. If you want, you can cut out your template and trace it onto cardboard. Cereal boxes work really well, or you can get fancy and get acrylic template plastic. So normally if you want to cut 12 all of one color, I would cut a 3.5 inch by 30 inch piece of fabric. For the purposes of this video, I did not. And I think it's a lot easier to sew these when the corners have been chopped off. So it's just a 1/4 inch on the point. So I'm going to do this to the rest of my triangles. You might have noticed when I was cutting these at super fast speed that this one did not have quite enough fabric, and I am not a purist. This is my very last scrap of it, and I'd like to use it in this quilt. So I am going to cheat, and I'm just going to sew a seam right there, and then I'll trim it, and you know, nobody will know except for anybody who watched this video. I think most of the time I would just recut it, but like I said, I am using only stash fabric and scraps, and these are pretty old, and this is all I've got. All right, I pieced this together, and I ironed it, and it's not perfect, but it will work. Okay, you are going to sew this equilateral triangle, 6-pointed triangle together in rows. So you take your first triangle and you want to make sure that you keep the orientation going the same way. Otherwise, if you start like this, then it messes up the shape. So make sure that you are careful as you take the pieces to the machine. So here you have your first 2 pieces, and you want to line them up as best you can, and then you just sew a 1/4 inch seam right along the side. Okay, so the back is a little bit wonky. I'm gonna fix it because I ran out of bobbin mid sew. So you can see that when you open this one up, you have kind of this perfect equilateral triangle going on. The reason why I like to trim these dog ears is because then you don't have anything hanging up over there, and it's easier at least for me to match the corners. So the next thing that you will do is you will take this next one. Well, first I would iron this, and I'm gonna iron it open. Okay, so when you are sewing the equilateral triangles together in a row, you just keep doing the same thing. So you make sure that your triangles are oriented the right way, not like this, like this. And then you line these two up. You just sew right along there, 1/4 inch. When you are done with the third seam, or actually the second seam, the third triangle, you will just open it up and press it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is pin these 2 rows together and then sew them together. And if you can see, I like to pin, let me grab a pin. These are super fine pins. I like to pin kind of right inside there. And then I just know that wherever my pin is, I'm going to go right to the outside of the point. So this is not perfect. These are not perfectly sewn. Maybe yours are, maybe they aren't. But what I do, sorry, do you love the sunlight coming in? It's finally sunny. So I put a pin right there and I can look through and say, okay, that's about where I want it. Maybe I can move it a little bit. And then here's the other one. I'll move it up a little bit closer. I'm going to put the pin right at the top. So I have this anchor pin going on. It's kind of hard to do when you're holding it. I like to put it flat on the table and do this. And then I take a pin and put it right next to my anchor pin. If you want, you can do that on both sides. You know, so one also right here. So then I know when I am sewing, I'm going to keep it, there's the seam, I'm going to keep it right, like maybe a millimeter into the seam allowance, if that makes sense. It is also important, or at least I think it makes it easier, if you line up the edges and pin there. So I did that on this edge and on this edge. Okay, so I am going to sew a 1/4 inch seam right there. I'm going to take the pin out awkwardly. And I'm going to slow down as I get to this spot. You're going to want to see, you can kind of see right where that intersection is. I am going to sew right to the right of that. And I'm going to put the camera down. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go slowly because there's no reason to go fast on this one. And you can see, I'm going to go right to the right of that. I don't know if you can see. Ooh, great camera work, Katie. There you go. And then I'm going to take out the pin so I don't run over it. Okay, so I want to show you this. The first one that I slowed down and stopped filming, that's what that one looked like. The second one, when I tried to film and sew at the same time, that's what that one looks like. I'm going to unpick it. If you feel comfortable with it, then leave it in. But I know, because I have this one, that I can have a little bit more precision. So this is what happens when you film and sew at the same time. So first you sew the first row, and then you sew the second row, then you sew the third row, the triangles together, and then the last row of triangles together, and then you sew the first and the second one together, and then the third and the fourth one together, And then you have two halves and you sew them together. So I have finished sewing all of the triangles together, as you can see. I love how this block looks with the dark background. I'm really glad that I chose that. I think it'll be great with my quilt. And then this is the template. And all you do is, it's not an exact match because I wanted to give people some room to trim. And so basically, you just sew it like this, and so you do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and then I will press it. Okay, there are a couple of different ways that you can make this block. The first one is that you can use a single fabric for each of these triangles and cut them out, and then you just sew them together. The second is that you can do skinny strips and make a string block. So these are 1-inch strips. I think that this is a little excessive, even though I love the way it looks, and it takes quite a long time. You need to make sure, if you're going to do strips, that I used all scraps because I really like these fabrics and I had a ton of scraps from making the rest of my blocks. And so you can see that you need wider scraps for the bottom, and you can use really small scraps at the top. And so that's what I did. The other way that you can do it, and you will see, that most of mine are pretty straight on. I just sewed the scraps together straight and pressed them. You can also sew them together kind of like this, so you get fun angles in your block. And the third thing that you can do is you can cut two 1.5-inch strips and one 2-inch strip. And when you do this, I would cut, if you have enough fabric, I would cut 30-inch long strips. So the first thing you do is you sew these together. So if you piece something together for your triangles and it is kind of wonky like this one, you would do the same thing. At least I would do the same thing. So first you would trim it to 3.5 inches. Okay, like this. And then you would use the same ruler or template and to find it. Oh, look, I did not trim it to 3.5, I trimmed it to 4. It's an easy fix. Okay, so now I would use this and trim this. Now, it is, sorry, can't cut and talk at the same time. It is less efficient to do kind of one-offs like this, but they will also be unique. So it just depends what you're looking for. The same thing if you are using scraps like this. You do not have to have all of your scraps be the same size, as you can see. You can have smaller ones at the top because you don't need the same, you don't need it to be square because you're cutting triangles. Okay, so I'm going to trim this one. And you can see it's a little bit wonky, so I can either line it up to here or to here. I'm probably gonna line it up like that. That's close enough. 1, 2, 3.5. There's no shame in counting. Now, the only thing you need to make sure that you do is you need to make sure that your base is wide enough. For example, it's not gonna work if I do it like this, right? So you need to make sure that your scraps are at least 1, 2, 3, I can't count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would probably go with 5 or 5.5 inches at the bottom. And then move this up a little bit and you just do the exact same thing. So, like I said, this method works really well if you have either scraps that you want to use up, or if you have a bunch of, or if you want all of the blocks, or all of the triangle blocks to be unique. Otherwise, I say it works if you're looking for efficiency, then cut, 2-inch or 1.5-inch strips, and by about 30 inches long, and you will get the 12 triangles that you're looking for. And now, you can see, let's see if we can clear this a little bit, that there are a number of ways that you can make these blocks. How about if I move that up a little bit so you can see it? Oh, the other thing that I didn't say, but that would work is, that's how I had intended this to go, but if you wanted, you could totally do vertical stripes. It would just be a very different look. And you could also do vertical stripes meets horizontal, or something more like that.